starting from the 1st century AD. AD means after the death of Jesus Christ. Okay, BC means before Christ. After the birth of Jesus Christ is 1st century AD till 2023. Right, this is the period.
This page number is this in our textbook?
No, it's not there in your book. You can take a snapshot only. Okay, you can take a snapshot. Now you can take a snapshot. You can take a snapshot so that you can keep it along with you. It's not there in your textbook. I have taken it from another book which I have. So it's an authentic one. You can also refer to the Glossary of Literary Terms written by M.H. Abrams. Okay, this is the name of the book written by M.H. Abrams. From that particular book, I have taken this page number 279 probably. Okay. Now see, the thing is the entire, time spent from 180 till 2023 AD can be divided into many ages or many periods based on different things, right? Based on different things. It has been clearly mentioned over here in the beginning of this block that literary history is nothing but a way of dividing the flow of literature, how the literature is flowing, how the trends are changing. Is there any certain movement from one to another, how they're gliding from one to another thing. Okay, so it talks about, or they divides the flow of literature into distinct periods, arranging them in a chronological order. So all the flows or the movements or the changes will be noted down for a period of time, and they will be arranged chronologically, and they will be classified on the basis of certain common features which can be found in the text written in a particular period, which cannot be found in the text written by some of the authors or the writers of another age. So it has been defined, it has been categorized and grouped together in such a way that you will be easily understand that what was the trend of that particular age, or what were the forms of writing were popular during that particular age, right? It's not like that we can divide the period of time into various sections. It's all because of our understanding, so that we can categorize them and understand in a particular segments, and it would be easy for us to remember. That's why we have divided. Otherwise, there is no such hard and fast rule to divide a period of time or a span of time into different periods or ages. Okay, so according to many historians, so this division is according to this man M.H. Abrams. So according to M.H. Abrams, it's an authentic book published by maybe Routledge or Oxford probably. Anyway, so it's one of the authentic books of literary terms. You can refer to that one. That is the Glossary of English Literary Terms written by M.H. Abrams, and there is also another writer along with whom he has collaborated. So he has divided entire period or span of time of English literature into many ages or periods. Basically, we have three periods in English literature. The first one is Old English period, second one is Middle English period, and the third one is Modern English period. Okay, so Old English, Middle English, and Modern English. Now, within these three categories, we can have some categories or sub ages or sub periods. Now, the time span of Old English is actually from 450 to 1066 AD. Okay, AD means Anno Domini, or after the death of Jesus Christ. Okay, so 450 AD to 1066. Now, both these ages or both these times are very important. Now, why these times are very important? The 450 and 1066. Something had happened. Why they have chosen this as the beginning or the end of that particular age? There are certain things which is historical, social, or political, which is connected to this particular ages or the time span. Okay, so Old English period or Old English age is also known as Anglo-Saxon age, because it was ruled by, dominated by, or it was actually inhabited by the people of Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, three different tribes of that time. Now, to know about, because in this particular unit, we are going to talk about three things, three aspects in three chapters or three units. First is literary history. All of them are talking about literary history. Literary history up to 16th and 17th century, means from the beginning till the 16th and 17th century. There is a mistake. It's talking about 16th and 16th again. So it will be 16th and 17th century. Then we have up to 17th, from 17th to 18th century, and then 19th and 20th century. So it's, in a way, in a nutshell, it's talking about the history from the beginning till the end or till the present time. Now, it's not possible for us to talk about the history of English literature or complete it within 1 hour. So what we are going to do is that I'm going to give you an overview of all the ages. Okay. So it can be easily understood if I will give you an overview from all the ages, like from middle age, old age, and uh, modern age. Okay. Now let's talk about the Old English period. It was also known as the Anglo-Saxon period or Old English period. Okay. Now, why this is called as Anglo-Saxon period? Let me take you back to the history of England, so that it will be easy for you to understand and connect the other succeeding ages. So let me tell you, because English, the language we are using right now, or the language which is being used or cultivated by the people of the world throughout the world, is not a language which has evolved like the other ancient languages, like Latin language, Indian Sanskrit language, okay, Persian languages. These languages are actually descended for a long period of time before English. We had Germanic language, Indo-European language, Indo-Aryan languages, right? But English didn't have anything at all since the beginning of their civilizations, since the beginning of their, what can I say, that grouping themselves as a English people. So let me take you back to England, which was at that time was known as Britain. Britain means, it was the name of the place, which was known as a Britain, which was a kind of, open land cultivated by some of the tribes. Because nowadays we have a number of population, but during that time, some 2000 years back, we have only 100 or 200 people of that time. And those people were also not the original inhabitor of that particular land, which was known as Britain. Okay. At 43 AD, here we are talking about 450 up to 1066. But before 43 AD, there was a tribe who were known as Britons or Celts or Celts. Okay, so Celtic's land or Briton's land is known as Britain. Is it clear? So it was before 43 AD. Those people were almost like 17 or 18 people in number. They were staying in some portion of England or Britain, right? They were cultivating there. They were harvesting some foods or crops. They had some cattle along with them. Okay. They started living in one place. Once the food will be over, once they will having the lack of food, they will immediately change their place and they will shift from one place to another place. That's why we have shifting cultivation of the time. So this is how they were actually starting their life, leading their life. Now, during the 43 AD, what happened is that this land was a fertile because of many things. And during the time of 43 AD, maybe like 2000 years back, Roman culture was already established, because Roman culture or Italian culture is much older than English culture, much older than any other culture like Greek culture, right? German culture. So the Roman people of the time also invaded the land which is known as Britain of the time. It was invaded, and during the invasion, these Celtic people were also there. The Britons were also there, right? So when these Britons were there, the Roman people came, they ruled England for 450 years almost. So it's not because that, okay, England suddenly got their power and they dominated the entire world, established their colonies. Once they were also facing the same thing that we had to face because of them. So it was Roman people who started colonizing their land. They came there, they taught them Christianity. They didn't also have their religion. The people, those who were inhabiting there, they didn't have the religion as well. They didn't even know that, okay, there is a concept of God. It was introduced by the Roman people, the Catholic churches, right? They came, the missionaries came, they taught them Christianity, they taught them what is God, what is the concept of God actually. Earlier, what happened? There was a system called paganism. Paganism means they believed in everything. They believed in a stone as a god, they believe in tree as a god. But it was the Christians of Roman civilization who came, who ruled, and also taught them language, give them a language. And the Romans were also influenced by the Germanic tribes and other Greek tribes as well. Okay. So when these people came in 43 AD, they started living here up to 440 or 430 probably, or 450. You can assume this one, that 450 is the last time of the Roman Empire. Okay. So these Roman people came to England. They ruled the Celtic people or the Britons who were already staying there because they were poor. They didn't know how to, fight with a good number of people. They simply were harvesting their foods, they're collecting some foods, and they were leading their life simply as nomadic people. Okay, they were not so powerful. They didn't know the art of fighting. They didn't know the art of war and all these things. So that's why they accepted their colonization. They accepted them as their masters, and they learned all the things from them. Now, what happened in 450 AD? It was not like that, okay, only Roman people were invading England. Other tribes also invading England and other parts of the world. And as it was surrounded by sea, people were coming, okay, from sea routes. They were trying to invade the land through the sea routes. So what happened in 450 AD? As the Roman people were dominating the Britain, they were colonizing Britain. Similarly, some other tribes of other lands, other Germanic tribes, were also attacking the Roman civilization or Rome. Okay. So, in order to save their own country, what they did is that they left England. They left England in 450 and they settled or went back to their own country to, you know, uh, drive all the looterers and plunderers who were actually attacking Rome. So in order to save their own country from the invaders, they left England. And think of what happened during that time. During the time, actually, these nomadic people who were under the rule of the Roman civilization for 450 years, they suddenly found them helpless. The Celtic people suddenly found them helpless because they don't know what to do right now. If another tribe will come and invade them, they will again become helpless because they were living under the rule or the governance of Roman civilization. It's very true because you have been accustomed to believe them as your masters because they ruled you for 450 years almost. So you are already accustomed into that system. Suddenly, if somebody will come and capture you in your or make you a hostage in your own room and keep you for 30 or maybe 3 months in one particular house without moving here and there, how will you feel suddenly when he will relieve you? You will feel unaccustomed to meet the outer world. Similarly, they also face the same thing. That's why when they were facing again attacks or invasions from other tribes, they asked for help to the three greatest tribes of German, and those tribes are Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. These Angles, Saxons, and Jutes are good and stronger tribes. They came and they tried to save these Celtic peoples from other invaders. But when these people come, they get to know that okay, this land is full of wealth. So they started colonizing them again, and they become the actual inhabitor of England. Okay. Now, when these people, Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, came to England, they brought their culture from German, West German. They brought their literature, they brought their language, they brought their all kind of habits. So when these people came, when the Roman people came, they influenced the Celtic people with their own language, literature, culture, history, religion, everything. Now these people came, and the Celtic people also had to undergo through the process of the same process from the Germanic tribes. So this is how they got influence of Germanic, West Germanic language and Roman language. And this is how they create a language which is known as Old English language. And let me tell you one important thing is that those tribes who came from West Germany to save these Celtic people or the actual inhabitants of England, their names were like Angles. So that's why we have England. The name England has been derived from the name of the tribe, that is Angles. So Angles land is known as England, and Angles language is known in English. Okay, this is how we got this new name, that is England and English. Earlier, it was known as Britain or British or Britain or Celtics. Okay, Celtics land. This is what was there. So this is how their language was actually mixing up or borrowing or taking or intaking. This intaking process was continuously growing up since the beginning of their history till the present time. Still they are actually borrowing words and phrases or expressions from other languages. That's why the language is expanding more and more. Okay, so this was the time when England had to face these things, and these Anglo Saxons and Jutes, they came, they started dominating them, and from 450 to 1066, these Angles people, Anglo Saxons and Jutes, were the actual inhabitor of that land, and they not only brought growth in literature but also in other things also. Okay, so these are the people who are known as yes, yes.
Wo- What is exactly Chaucer? Age of Chaucer means?
Age of Chaucer means Chaucer is the name of a great poet of the old Middle English period. That's why this name is being given after him. Okay, so we are going to talk about that also. Okay, give me some time. I will be just moving there. We will slowly complete it. Okay. Yes. So there were many kings in Anglo Saxons and Jutes, and finally, what happened? William the Conqueror or William the Third become the king as the of the age of Anglo-Norman as that started in 1066. In 1066, there was a battle, the Battle of Hastings that happened between the Anglo-Saxon king and the King of Normandy, William the Conqueror. Why his name is known as, or is Conqueror? Because he win the battle, the Battle of Hastings, and then the Old English period ended, and the Anglo-Norman or Middle English period started in 1066. Now, from 1066 to 1500, these periods are actually known as dark periods because during this time there were no such progress, no such progress. During this time, the Gulf countries were making profit, and they were superior than all other cultures, all other things. People from Saudi Arabia, people from Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and all these places. During that time, during the Middle Ages, the Muslim civilization was much stronger than any other civilization, and they contributed almost in all the fields: science, history, geography, astronomy, okay, and all these fields. So if you will go to the base of science, you will find that okay, all the almost like the father of a particular thing, like father of optics, you will find Jabir bin Hayyan, right? So all the Muslims at the beginner who have done all these things in the beginning, in the Middle Ages, right? But later on, what happened after the fall of Constantinople, after the fall of Constantinople in 1453 probably, uh, it went through a drastic change. It went through a drastic change, and this is how, what can I say? It had a long process. It had to go through a long process of transformation, because of many things. They lost their energy, they lost their power, they lost their motivation, and these people were actually increasing day by day, increasing their growth, increasing their economy, increasing their wealth, and all these things, education, eligibility, all these things, right? Now, after 1066 to 1500, during this period, the first 200 years were known as the Dark Ages, because during this period they didn't have any progress, not only in literature but also in any other field. From 1066 to almost like to 1250 or 15, 50 or 60, something like that. Or maybe you can call it like 1337 or 40. So 1340 is the beginning of the age of Chaucer, which will end in 1400. Okay. So in the Middle Ages, we have Dark Age, where there were no such improvement, though no such progress in literature, in politics, in culture, in social life as well. After that, we had age of Chaucer. So during the time of the Anglo-Saxon period, we had English language, that was Old English language, in which we have a great epic. The first Anglo-Saxon epic or first English epic or the national epic of England is known as Beowulf. It is of almost like 3,000, no, 30,000, 33,000 lines probably. It was written by some unknown writers, unknown poets, or anonymous poets. It not written by one poet. More than 30 or 40 poets has written this particular poem, and it's talking about the Westlandic saga or the Germanic tribe. Okay, it is a story about a Germanic tribe. It's a mythical story. It's a religious story, and it's also an epic. Okay. Now after this, 1066, the Anglo-Saxon period ended and Anglo-Norman period started. Now during the time of the Anglo-Norman period, the official language of England was not English or Old English, it was French, because the people who won the battle of 1066 was from France, Anglo-Norman French language. So French language became the official language, language of the office, language of education, language of communication. But Old English language was also there, and which was only spoken by the original tribes of that particular land. They won't be able to communicate. As for example, suppose we have Telugu language, Bengali language, and other languages, but if you want to communicate beyond your own social or uh, uh, cultural strata, then you have to choose a language which is common to other people. So this is how they were also doing. The original inhabitants of England of the time were just speaking into their own mother tongue. But when it comes to talk about education, then justice, health, all that, in all these spheres, they were using French language. So they also had to take a French influence. So if you read about the growth of English language, you will find that okay, English had to face so many influences. First is Greek influence, Roman influence, Indonesian, uh, what was that? Yeah, Anglo-Norman influence of Shakespeare is also there. It was later. So they took many words from other languages as well. Right? So in the Middle Ages, it was French language before Chaucer. Okay, before 1340. During the Dark Ages, it was Dark Age because people were not using their own language. That's why some of the linguists of the world are saying that okay, it is the language which creates the world, not anything else. Without language, you can't imagine a day. Without language, you can't imagine the world. It will suddenly stop without language. Okay, so as it was not their language, because they were unfamiliar with French, they had to communicate, they had to be accustomed with listening and talking with in French language. Later on, Chaucer started writing in their own vernacular language, that is Old English language. It was he who made a revolution that, okay, even though I know French, I won't write in French. I'll write in my own vernacular language so that my own people can read and they can be inspired from my own approach, and they will also start following me, and that's how we can save our own language, our own land. So it was Chaucer who started it. Okay, it was Chaucer who started it. I'm not going to the other pages because here only I'm going to conclude it. You can go and refer. The first age is also known as the age of Chaucer also, according to him. They're going to talk about religious poetry, secular poetry, then translations from other languages like French is one of them, chronicles, verse, political songs, and all this. Characteristic of middle age has been given. Few of the characters. Age of Chaucer. Chaucer is a person actually 1340 to 1400. His time span, right? He is a man who started this revolution, who started this particular kind of progress or movement or deviation from the mainstream culture of the French people. Okay, so he started writing, and he wrote many, beautiful work. He is also known as the father of English poetry. Sometimes he is also known as father of English prose as well. And there's a critic whose name is G.K. Chesterton. He says that if he is the father of poetry, father of prose, then he is the grandfather of novel also, because of his one particular anthology of poems, which is known as the Canterbury Tales. The Canterbury Tales is a collection of stories narrated by the pilgrims who were actually going to visit a particular pilgrimage or a religious place. Okay, so there are 29 pilgrims who had to speak two stories or two tales while going to the pilgrim, place, and while returning back, they also had to do narrate two stories, okay, or two tales. So this is how he actually this is also a kind of concept which was already spoken by Boccaccio from another ancient poet. He got this idea from that poet and he started writing about it. And just after Chaucer, many of the poets from their own vernacular languages started writing, such as William Langland is there, right? Then we have some other poets. Okay, Chaucer is there. Then we have the Morning Stars. John Gower is there. Okay, Chaucer, John Gower, William Langland. Then we have, yes, Sir John Mandeville, John Wycliffe. John Wycliffe is known as the Morning Star of Reformation because he's a man, he's a religious man, he's a Christian priest, you can say, who started again a reformation in religious thinking. That's why he's known as the Morning Star of Reformation. Okay, he was a Protestant. Okay, considered one of the uh, forerunners of Protestant Reformation. Wycliffe was credited with the first translation of the Bible into English. So he is the man who first translated, because Bible was not written or descended in a language which is known as English. It was first descended in Hebrew, right? Hebrew is the language. So from Hebrew, it was first translated by John Wycliffe in maybe uh, 1300 or something, or yeah, not 13, 1100, something like that. I do not remember the time. So it was he, but we generally follow the accepted version, that John's version, which is published in 1611 probably later on. Okay, so these are some of the poets who contributed and who started writing in English. So not only English, they were also writing in French as well. They were writing them and also translated them. So probably if you will start writing right now, if you are going to become a poet or a writer, what you are going to do? You will definitely write in English probably because you know the language, English. But along with English, you will also write in your own vernacular language, right? It's not possible that okay, you will simply follow one language. Sometimes you'll also write at least one or two work. So that was the inspiration the fellow poets also received from uh, Chaucer. Okay. And during this time, we had certain characteristics which has been mentioned over here. You can see medieval literature, whether secular or religious, was mainly allegorical. So most of the works were allegorical. I already told you in the beginning that what is the meaning of allegory. So why we have to be familiar with all these terms? Because of this only. Sometimes you will come across these terms and you need to know what is that form. Okay. Then the purpose was to convey moral and religious truths to an ignorant and illiterate people. Moral and didactic strain runs through all the forms, okay, through all the forms of literature. The poet delights as well as teaches at the same time. So the purpose of writing poetry was not only to entertain the people or the audience or the reader, but also to instruct them, but also to teach them the morals, the truths, the values of life. Large body of work is impersonal and anonymous. It's very true that okay, during the time when these people were writing, they didn't have the power or courage to publish or narrate the story that they have written in front of people because they were living under the rule of the French government, right? So you are not supposed to speak about your own language when you are living in a country where the uh, French or the other language is dominating or is the official language. How can you write and promote your own language? So it will be a kind of offense. So most of the writing were written and also not mentioned. As we write something right now, and we also write the date as well as our name who has written. But during the time, they didn't know that kind of fashion that okay, we will keep this for a long period of time. They didn't have that kind of intention in some 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. That's why most of the works are anonymous. Nobody knows who has written that particular work. As the printing press was also not invented by them, this is also another important cause of not having names. Invented, the large chunks of literature were communicated orally. Owing to this, the work ceased to be personal property of any author. Okay? This is what is happening. Because printing press came much later, maybe in 12,000, or sorry, 1250 by Johannes Gutenberg, and later on in England, it was established by William Caxton in 1476. Okay, so after that, we had a revolution or we had a kind of renaissance. So, renaissance started in English literature, English civilization, just after many things because of the ascension of the Queen Elizabeth. Then there were so many, quest of discovery, like Vasco da Gama started discovering India. All other, people were starting discovering. They were talking about astronomy and all these things. And Renaissance started because of many things. Okay, one such thing is printing press. The new learning started. The transition from medieval to the modern was accelerated by the spirit of new learning. English became the national language from a dialect. So it was only a dialect during the time of the French government, but later on it became a language of the entire country. Okay, he has written many works. One such is Troilus and Cresside. Then we have The House of Fame. The Canterbury Tales is obviously one of the anthologies, and which is too much famous. Okay, the Book of the Duchess is one of them. Confessio Amantis, Speculum Meditans, and Vox Calamentis. These works were written in Latin. Okay, then William Langlet is also famous for the vision of William concerning Piers the Plowman. The name of the poem is Piers the Plowman. And we have John Mandeville. Then we have John Wycliffe. All these people are religious preachers and they already contributed into the prose section of that particular literature. Prose means they translated the Bible into their own language, in vernacular language. So this is also a kind of contribution into the promotion of the language. This is what happened in this particular age. Okay, in the uh, age of Chaucer. Okay, so it lasts up to 1400. So from 1400 to 1500, or 1500 to 1666. This age is known as the Elizabethan age because Queen Elizabeth is ascended maybe in 1558 probably. Okay, so after the ascending into the throne by Queen Elizabeth the First, there was a drastic change, and this change is not actually a negative one; it was a positive one. Okay? This change was a positive one, and this change was brought by a lady queen. Before her accession, there were a lot of kings as well. But the problem is they were fighting among their own families, royal families. They were fighting for the throne. But because of this lady, King Queen Elizabeth the One, they become the number one civilizations within few years throughout the world. Maybe she was a divine queen, okay? Because whatever she was taking, whatever she was deciding, everything was fruitful during her time. Okay. So within a span of 50 or 60 years, she changed the entire scenario of England. There were two such queens in England. One is Elizabeth the First, and the last one is Queen Victoria. Okay. These are the two queens. One is in the Elizabethan age, another one is in the which age? Another one is in the Victorian age, which is going to start in 1837 to 1901 in the modern age. Okay, so one was in the Elizabethan age, or also known as the age of Chaucer. No, sorry, not Chaucer, age of Shakespeare. Okay, so during that age also there were so many things that were happening politically. They were winning all the battles. There was some 100 years wars, war of roses, right? So many wars were going on, but in all the wars, the Spanish Armada, okay, in all the wars almost, England was having their victory. Okay, and in the form of writing. So let me talk about the form of writing. How literature also was improving their, uh, you know, uh, length. Okay, they were also spreading from one particular genre to another. So during the time of Chaucer, only poetry and prose was famous. We had only limited number of poems, limited number of proses. Proses were mostly translated works from French, Germany, Italy, I mean Roman language, Latin language. But the poetry was written based on the stories of the heroes and heroines from their own mythology. Okay, and those works were also not of that kind of variety which is we have right now. But in the next age, in the age of Chaucer, in the age of Elizabeth Queen, there were a drastic change from poetry and prose to we have an inclination towards drama. That's why this age, particular age of Shakespeare, Jacobean Caroline age, is known as the age of the plays or dramas. Okay. During this period, we had drama in various forms, like we had yes, like we had tragedies, we have comedies, we have melodramas, we have stage plays, then we have some plays which are known as interlude. Okay, this kind of plays were being played. So let's go back to this one. Before going to the syllabus that we have actually, let me give you an overview within few minutes. Okay, within 2 or 3 minutes, I will be giving. Okay. So 1500 to 60, this is known as actually as the age, which is the Middle Age. Okay, and in the Middle Age, the first is 1500 to 1660. This is almost like 150 years. This is known as the age of Renaissance because during this time there was a lot of flourishing in all the fields, be it astronomy, be it adventure, be it science, be it arts, in all sculpture, all these fields they were actually improving. They were bringing something new or innovations. They were actually becoming or flourishing throughout the world. Okay, they become the number one only during this particular time. The Renaissance had happened. Renaissance means the rebirth, reawakening. Okay, This was happening during the time of this particular 150 years. From 1558 to 1603, this is known as the Elizabethan age, particularly because this was under the rule of Elizabeth the First. Okay, then we have Jacobean age. Hmm? Jacobean age also started from 1603 to 1625. Then we have Caroline age. So during this age, Jacobean and Caroline age, also prose, poetry, drama was also familiar. And during this time, we had the playwrights like, and also the poetry group like metaphysical poets that we already talked yesterday. Then we had cavalier poets who were supporting the Charles. Caroline age means the supporters of Charles. Okay. Then we have in 49 to 60, this is not ruled by any particular king or queen. This age was known as Commonwealth period or Puritan interregnum. Okay, because this particular age, this particular period of time of 10 or 15 years was actually ruled by Oliver Cromwell, who was a Puritan. And during this time also, they beheaded the first Charles the First of that England, who was the and after the king, death of this man, of that king, they had a rule of almost like 11 years by the Commonwealth period or the Puritan period. Who those people were too rigid. They didn't support any king. That's why they killed Charles the First. But later on, what happened? The Cavalier poets and others of England, okay, and others of England, they believe that okay, we have to have kingship, otherwise we will also be facing devastated, transition from one thing to another because of some religious orthodoxy. Okay, that's why they again restored the kingship, establishing or bringing Charles II into the throne, and that period is also known as the Age of Restoration. Okay, from 1660s, the age of 1662, later on 1700 is known as the Age of Restoration. Okay. Then 1600 to 1785, this age is known as Neoclassical period, which we also have talked about yesterday. Neoclassical period is a period of almost like 200 years within which we have small ages as well. Okay. For example, the first one is the Restoration age, which is spanning from 1660 to 700. Then 1700 to 1750 is known as Augustan age, which I also have talked about. All these ages are part of Neoclassical period. Then we have 1745 to 1785. This age is known as the age of sensibility or age of Johnson, Samuel Johnson, or maybe John Dryden or Alexander Pope. You can talk about all of them. Okay. Then 1785 to 1832, this age is known as Romantic period. So as you asked me that which one is first, Neoclassical or Romantic. So you know it very well that Romantic age is coming just after Neoclassical age. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Then we have 1832 to 1901, which I was talked about, that this is again a span of time which was ruled or which was actually utilized by the people of England under the queenship of Queen Victoria. Okay, so because of these two queens, probably because of these two queens, they had the present scenario, which whatever they have right now. It's all because of these two queens and their decisions and that rule. Okay. Just after this, we have the pre-Raphaelite movement, or it was a movement, or it's a period which was ruled by some of the artists, or also you can say writers who were familiar or who were expert in both writing as well as expressing their writing through their own paintings. Okay. Then we have 1880 to 1901, aestheticism and decadence. It's also talking about art for the sake of art. So when people were focusing on art for its own sake, not for anything else, this particular period is known as aestheticism. Then we have the Edwardian period before the First World War. Then we have modern period up to 1914 before First World War. Not before First World War. So from First World War to Second World, it is modern. After 45, that is after the Second World War, till present, it's known as the postmodern age. Now, let me tell you one transition of thought. What kind of transition we can find in human civilization, human thought, human thinking process. See, when we are talking about the Anglo-Saxon period, during that time, people were much inclined to talk about gods, their religious mythologies, and all these things. Okay, so they had a discussion. They had a kind of conversation with the other person. In that conversion, in that process of making values, norms, and talking about the truths that has been delineated by our religious scriptures. So they were talking about such kind of thing, and they were only believing that okay, God is the supreme power. So God, goddesses, queens, and kings were the matter of talking, a matter of discussion during that time. Later on, what happened from goddesses or gods in the ancient period, it was the god who was the uh, center of discussion, a center of focus to write about, to discuss about orally or in a written form. In the medieval ages, what happened? The center of focus actually changed. From God, it came to the kings and queens who become the demigods. Okay, they become the demigods to the people. And during this period, most of the works are going to be talked about the kings, the queens, their time spent, their scenarios, social and political aspects, which was available during the time of that particular time span of a particular king or queen. So in the medieval ages, the main aspect of a particular literary work was revolving around the kings and queens, their wars, the destructions, their glories, and all these things. So from God, it descended to the demigods who are known as the kings and queens, because the kings and queens of England were also said that, okay, we have divine law. Okay, we have been descended or we have been sent to save you. We are the saviors of you. We have a divine law. Divine law means God has given us that power. But after the Middle Ages, since the beginning of the modern age, man only become the center of focus or discussion. So from God, we had a discussion of semi-gods like kings and queens, and then certainly we are going to talk about man only or human beings, not any other creatures. Human beings. In postmodernism, in modernism, we are going to talk about human beings. In postmodernism, we are actually returning back to the ancient time. In postmodernism, it's talking about our personal self. It's talking about not only about humans, it talks about gods, it talks about religion, it talks about other species like nature, climate change, and all these things. Now we are living in a particular age where we are actually returning, we are trying to return back to the ancient periods to have a healthy and good life. Because we have come up to a particular situation, I think probably we can say this is the end of, you know, morality, ethics, norms, and all these things. We have become so selfish and we have become so self-conservative that we are not bothering about harming the other person or the other's spaces. Okay. So that's why, because of this kind of movement or transition, probably most of the theological experts, most of the social anthropocentric experts, also some environmentalists are saying that okay, we should move back to the ancient periods. We have to return back. That's why we are having fashions and trends which are of the old ages. right? We are wearing some clothes, maybe some designs, which are not of the present date, which were familiar or famous once upon a time in the old ages, right? So we are returning back to that particular ages. Okay. So this was what I had to say about the ages or the chronologies of the order of the history of English literature according to M.H. Abrams. Now, in this particular syllabus that you have here, what you have is that you have three chapters or three units. In first unit, you're going to talk about from beginning, that is Anglo-Saxon period. They haven't talked about Anglo-Saxon period, but they started suddenly about Chaucer. Okay, so they didn't talk about the first 14 years, 1400 years or 1300 years. They simply talked about starting talking about history of English literature from Chaucer. So from Chaucer also you will find that okay, what are the basic characteristics of that particular age? How many forms or genres were popular of that particular age? Who were the major writers? This is how all these units has been divided. As for example, you can look into it. The first is about talking about introduction. That okay, this particular middle age, they are directly talking about 1066 to 1350. In this particular age, you can find religious and secular poem and some of the translations from prose. Okay, and this translation can be based on many things. Right. After this, they are talking about these features. Then they suddenly go to the age of Chaucer. In age of Chaucer is also filled with all these religious and secular aspects also. Yeah, they're also going to talk about some other poets or contemporaries of Chaucer, given some examples. Then we have 15th century, possible causes of barrenness. What was the causes of barrenness? Why it was not flourishing throughout the world? So social disorder was there, changes in grammar and language. Okay, failure to understand Chaucer. These are some of the aspects I didn't talk linguistic part because as there was a change in transition of thought or thinking process of the people, of the audience, reader, and also writer. Similarly, in linguistic point of view, there also a transition. The old English language, which was there in the Anglo-Saxon period, is not understandable for us because we can't read that one, which was full of inflections. Whatever letter is there in a word was also pronounced. Right now, we have silent words, also silent letters. As for example, psychology is a word which has a P letter which is silent. But during the time, whatever letters they have in a word, they had to be pronounced. And they mean something else based on their own understanding of that old age. So which cannot be read by the people of native speakers of English also right now. Okay. So it had to go through a certain changes from old English language to the Middle English, which was influenced by French, Scandinavian, Greek, and other civilization or other languages. Then finally, it went to the hand of Chaucer, who started writing into the Middle Ages or Middle English language. Then it was Shakespeare who has almost included or created 20,000 words and phrases. He himself created new words, new phrases, which we are using regularly, maybe in English expressions. Okay. But in the Middle Ages, what happened? Inflections were omitting. Okay. From Old English language, there was a change in vowel sounds. Consonant shifts were there, vowel shifts were there. There was also some laws also established like Grimm's law, Warner's law. All these things were also there. Okay. Now, because of this, we have the present English, without which, if there won't be a kind of great vowel shift means earlier, maybe during the time of Chaucer, the word life was like simply known as leaf, right? Was simply known as leaf during the time of Chaucer and Shakespeare. But right now we have life. So here there is a gliding of the vowel sounds. So from one simple singular or mono vowel sound, we have now diphthongs or dual vowel sounds. So we have a great vowel shift in the 15th century or in the 14th century, because of which there is a drastic change in the English language. But if you will go look back the history and look back the textbooks written by some of the authors or poets in the medieval ages, you will also find very difficult to understand. It's all because of the great vowel shift, the consonant shifts, and some other changes in grammar like Grimm's law and Varner's law. Okay. Then let's talk about the age of preparation. Literary achievements were also there. English Chaucerians, some of the poets were there in English who were getting inspiration from Chaucer, and they were actually following the style of Chaucer to write. Thomas Occleve is there, John Lydgate, Alexander Barclay, John Scranton, the Book of Philip Sparrow. Then popular folk poetry was also there. So ballad was there. 1558. Okay, so English drama was also the religious plays were there, morality play, mystery play, interlude, all were there. Now you will be surprised to with these terms. Now, what is the meaning of religious play? Religious play is actually an enactment of a portion of a religious scripture or a event that we can find in our own religious scriptures or in our own religious mythology. Morality play is talking about moral ethics and all these things. Interlude, which will interlude means it's a kind of short play within a play. Okay, so such kind of forms were also there. The Senecan tragedy, I already said, the first century AD. Seneca was a famous playwright, and she wrote a revenge tragedy. Senecan tragedy means revenge tragedies. Okay, a tragedy which is based upon taking revenge. As for example, Macbeth, Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, all this written by Shakespeare. Okay, so these are the things that has been talked about. Then we have Renaissance over here. The early Renaissance started in 485 and 1560. Never confused with the span of time. Okay, some people, some of the historians, some of the great scholars who has written authentic books, which we should refer, they have their own way of categorizing or dividing a particular span of time based on certain criteria. Okay, so in this particular book, as they have mentioned, like early Renaissance, 1485 to 1560, you do not have to be confused. This age can be varied based on different writers who is writing it. Okay, strong monarchy was there because of Queen Elizabeth. Context with Europe, Henry the Fourth, Fifth, Seventh, all of their royal parentage was there. Education and reforms were also happening in terms of all aspects. Caxton's printing press, which was uh, uh, brought in England in 1476, I already mentioned it. Prose of early Renaissance, like Thomas More was there, Roger Ascombe, okay, Sir Thomas Way, Henry Howard, Sackville. So they have talked about some of the time span. They have talked about the time span, and as well as they have also talked about the forms, literary forms, which was popular or prevalent during that time. Apart from the main figures or main literary figures, they have also talked about some of the contemporaries of that particular age. As for example, take the Elizabethan age. In Elizabethan age, you will find Shakespeare as the main figure. But apart from Shakespeare, we have Roger Ascombe, we have the university wits like Thomas Kate, George Peele, right? We have 7 university wits, Christopher Marlowe, all these things. So apart from the main literary figure, we have some other contemporaries. We also have to know about them, and based on that, this book has been written. What is my suggestion is that you please go through each of the units, first, second, and third from this block 5. Look into the time span and know the title of the age, be it Renaissance, be it Elizabethan age. What is the span of the time, 1558 to 1603? What is the very find out some important characteristics of this particular age, main figures or main literary figures, and their contemporaries, 1 or 2 works, and finally you will find that there will be some model questions at the end of each of the chapter. Okay, and these questions are going to be give you an overview that okay, what you are going to read in this particular unit or block. First question is discuss Chaucer's contribution to English literature. So what you have to talk about is that his contribution in language, establishing the own vernacular language, and literary contribution. You can talk about some of his works like Canterbury Tales, Vox Clamantis, right? The Duchess, the Book of Duchess. Then we have explained Renaissance and factors that shaped the Renaissance in England. So what was the cause of having Renaissance? There are many things: political, social, educational, religious. Because of all this, in all these spheres, they were having change and transition from one form to another, one state to another, from bad to good. Okay, this is what was happening, and people were also eager to do all these things. Right, nowadays, uh, maybe Telugu industry or South Indian movie industry is having their renaissance. They're prevailing throughout the world, right? So similarly, during the time of Renaissance, English language, English culture, English ethics, norms, rules, astronomy, science, all these were having their renaissance. Okay. Other questions are also there, like discuss the various kinds of drama that flourished during the time of Elizabethan age and the uh, reason for their popularity. Because of printing press, because of the middle class who were growing up, they were started learning, they were focusing on reading. Suddenly, you had a dark age where you didn't have printing machines. Suddenly, what happened? If you will get that, okay, all the books are being written. You will have a new book, so you will have a craze to read. So during this time, people were having a kind of craziness to read. Whatever they will get, they will just read, understand, and perform, act, because they already had a kind of ability to perform orally. When they were reading, they were become more competent to do that one. Okay. Discuss the contribution of university which is also there here in this book, I think. University words, you can look into it. These are Shakespeare's. Yes, these are the university words. John Lilly, George Peele, Robert Greene, Thomas Keat, Christopher Marlowe. There will be a title, I think. Even if the title not there, you can think about them. Okay, these people are the known as the university wits because uh, all the seven writers or playwrights were either studied from Oxford or Cambridge University. Okay. So I hope you will also go through at home all these things. And if you have any query regarding anything, probably I am there in the group, WhatsApp group. If you have any doubt or query, you can ask me. And please go through the last portion. Okay. In the last, there is a model question paper at the end of your book. You can also refer to that also. Okay. That will give you an insight how to pay. It's not actually a question, previous year question. It's a model question. Compare and contrast assonance and alliteration. Can you tell me what is assonance and alliteration? We talked about it, right? We talked about assonance, we talked about consonants and alliteration. And this was the first term probably in the beginning of our class. So alliteration is the repetition of a consonant sound at the beginning of succeeding words or lines. Consonance is also the same thing probably, but assonance is the vowel sound. When there is a repetition of vowel sound or vowel letter in the beginning of each succeeding words, that is what is known as assonance. Describe the three unities. What are the three unities? Time, place, and accent. Different types of sonnets: Petrarchan sonnets, Italian sonnet, okay, Spenserian sonnets, Shakespearean sonnets. Describe the features of comedy of humors. Comedy of humors, I also talked about it. Ben Jonson, right? Describe features of, okay, explain difference between story and plot. What is the difference between story and plot? Then difference between biography and autobiography. When we were talking about the prose section, we talked about this one, that these are non-fiction prose. Okay. significant features of neoclassicism. We talked about it, like they always focus on rules, restrictions, logic, reason, rationality, science. So you have to talk about that one also. So this is how you'll get to know that, okay, what you are going to read for your final exam. And if you'll go through these 3 units, you will have a better understanding of English literature for your later subjects. Okay. So hope you have understood it.
Mr. Hussain, I have one question.
Yeah, can you please? Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the Commonwealth period, which was the Puritan intrigue.
Yes, yes.
Okay, you mentioned 11 years. They were no, they were not under the rule of a king or a ruler. So during this time, where the people ruled by the Pope.
Yes, there was a man who is known as Oliver Cromwell. Okay. He was one of the leader of the Puritan movement. Okay. So among that Puritanism, among the people or the popes of that time, he was being elected or as the leader of that time. Okay, as there were no king after beheading Charles the First, so they decided that okay, it will be under the rule of Oliver Cromwell, who was maybe a kind of lieutenant or a Puritan supporter or leader, one of the leaders.
Thank you. Because that question arises because it says Puritan intrigue. So during Puritanism, the rule mostly was headed or directed by the religious leaders like the popes.
Yes, 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 yes. It was like that, and it was because of that kind of orthodoxy of religion, Puritanism. They killed the king, actually beheaded him, and later on he also these people also banned all the kings and queens from their land, and they had to be actually leave that country. Later on, they felt that okay, we are going to face a very difficult situation because of these orthodoxies. People were protesting, and they were actually hatching a plan to bring Charles II, that is the son of Charles I, whom they had actually killed. And later on, they brought actually him into the throne in 1660, which is known as the age of restoration. That means the restoration of the king again. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hussain.
Yes. So thank you for your patience to listen me since last 6 classes. Hope you have enjoyed and you have learned something at least to make a better progress in your study of literature. Okay.
Thank you so much for assisting us, Mr. Hussain. I really
Uh,
appreciate it.
okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. You can leave, and if you have any query or question, either you can text me in that group. Otherwise, you can approach to your department.
Thank
Or
you.
yeah. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah.